All right, Al. So, we've talked a little bit about pre-production, and I want to talk a little bit about prototyping. Okay. Now that you guys, now this is an interaction class, and a lot of times, when you're prototype, what you want to do when you have a bigger project like a website or like an app or a video game or something is rather than just like kind of building the whole thing, you want to sort of kind of plan it out. Okay. There's kind of this, there's these ideas of sort of, there's an old design term that says basically measure twice, cut once. And the idea of that meaning if you plan it out, it saves you time later on so you don't make mistakes or you can go back and edit things. And so what we're going to be doing, is talking about prototyping. Okay. So I assigned you guys your second project, which is kind of making a website that has some form of, interactivity to it. And essentially what before you get to there, I'd like you to kind of prototype out some of what's going to happen. Okay. So there's kind of these stages of prototyping, as I like to kind of say. These are things that you can kind of do before you get to any heavy programming or anything that requires a lot of extra work. There are sketches, wireframes, style tiles, a paper prototype, a page comp or a mock-up, a low interactive page comp or mock-up, and a low fidelity prototype. Okay, and I kind of want to go through the various stages here so we can talk about it. So the first is like literally just kind of a sketch. Okay. This is literally you and, people who matter, the, key people. This might be your boss or your client or someone. We usually call these stakeholders. A stakeholder is someone with a stake in the project. All right. And, you know, you would meet with them and kind of plan out an idea. Okay. And in a sketch, it's kind of whatever. You can do it with paper, you could do it digitally. So, let's just imagine I'm just going to use a digital page here. And let's just say for the sake of argument, me and my team, I've come up with this idea. Okay. It's an app and you open up the app and you can, click on a button and it takes a photo and you can send it to a contact list. Okay. So a sketch would be like, all right, well, here's the phone and, maybe up here, this is like an image and there's the button, big shiny in the middle. And then, I don't know, over here are some buttons. Okay. So this is a sketch. Okay. The point of it is that it's super rough. You're not really focusing on any aspect of design per se. I mean, you are in terms of like layout and things like that, but you're not worried about typography or color or anything like that, color schemes or layout. You're basically just doing a very simple layout. Okay. Image goes here, button goes there. If we were making a website, it's like, banner goes here, text goes here, footer goes there, right? Something like that. Okay. So a sketch is, really, it's meant to be low stakes. You don't spend a lot of time on it because the idea is you might just throw it, literally crumple it up into a ball and throw it in a waste paper basket or recycle it or whatever. Okay. So don't spend a lot of time and don't be married to any idea or layout. The whole point of it is to kind of workshop between you and stakeholders in the project. Okay. One level up is what we call a wireframe, which is like a sketch. It's just a little more formal. Sketches are meant to, once again, kind of create a basic layout without worrying about in-depth design concepts. So the point of a wireframe is like you might want to lay out where images are going to go, or key text or key icons possibly, but we're not worried about color or typography. We're not worried about, which image, what does our logo look exactly, or which image goes, which image are we going to put? It's really just kind of a general layout. It's like a sketch, but a little bit more formal, just a little bit. People can, you can make these in any kind of program like Photoshop, Illustrator. I'm going to show you guys Sketch, which is a great program to use, which is free. You don't have to use it if you're more of an Illustrator fan or you want to use some other program, you can do that too. But wireframes are simple kind of layouts. Okay. Next is a what we refer to as a style tile. All right, so for a lot of interactive projects in the year of 2025, it's like, let's say we have a website, right? Let's say I have a website for SF State. The thing about this is like, well, this website is on my desktop right now, right? And it looks like this, but that same website is going to have to fit onto a smaller device like my phone. Oops. Like this, right? And so you can see that the layout's a little different, and this is because of different size devices. And we'll talk more about this, or actually we won't, but we'll get more into like how to kind of, in the 228 class, you get more into like how to do what's called a responsive. But my point is that rather than focusing on your visual design being pixel perfect of like, okay, this goes here and this goes there, and all of this, we kind of work on um, a style tile is about kind of setting the general visual design, but it not being specifically the exact way that your final product is going to look. The way I like to explain it is, if you're doing, my wife and I are reupholstering a couch, okay? And rather than, it's a pretty costly project. And when you reupholster, it's like, well, rather than just redoing the whole thing based off a photo, a lot of times they'll give you samples, right? And it's like, here are some samples of various fabrics. And, you can look at them and they have little bits of information about it. And the idea is like, this is a sample. It's not meant to be, this is what it's going to look like. It's just meant to be like, look at this and try to imagine this applying to your entire couch. Or if you were, doing, like if you were doing wallpaper, right? Or even color, painting a wall or something, instead of doing the entire wall, they might just show you a little swatch of the color, right? So that's kind of what a style tile is. It's a general kind of laying out of general design concepts without it, you're sort of divorcing it from or separating it from the actual project. So it's like, if this is my style tile, I might put like general colors that I'm going to use. This is what typography would look like in general. It doesn't matter if my website is, this long or this high or whatever. These are the general colors you would see. This is the general, typography you would see. These are the general kinds of icons and stuff that you might run across. Okay. And that's what a style tile is. Here's an example where it's like, if I was redoing City College's website, which is another college I teach at, it's like, these are various colors. I would probably put like a hexadecimal value so people know what colors these are. These are the kind of textures you might run across. These are the type you would see, like headings, subheadings, body text. You might want to list the fonts and the sizes and all that kind of stuff. Maybe just general adjectives about how in general the project should feel. It should feel, so for instance, a lot of times when I work with clients, rather than, being very specific about colors or type, I might just use general describing terms like, how should this feel? And someone will say, I want my website to feel very sophisticated or very modern or whatever, you know what I mean? And then you kind of extract, I would say, okay, well, if you want it modern, what does modern mean right now? And that might mean certain fonts or certain colors or certain styles, right? And so, these are the general adjectives that our project should feel like, regardless of what color or what fonts or what textures we have. Next is what's called a paper prototype. This term is kind of going away, but a paper prototype is essentially meant to show interactivity. Okay, so if let's say we were designing a website or like an app on our phone. I'm gonna go back to Sketchpad for a second. So it's like I was talking about an app, and it's like, let's say here's the name of my app. It's called Photobug. And then that goes to the next page, and it's like there's some buttons here. I know this is really great drawing on my part. Take photo. I don't know, share photo, right? And then you click on that and it goes to the next, right? And this is like where the camera is, and maybe this is like a viewfinder. And there's the button, and there's, I don't know, so on and so on. So like this is an example of a paper prototype where, once again, we're not worried about visual design, but we're showing how the interaction between screens go. So I start here, maybe I click on something or I swipe and it goes to this page, and then I click and this goes here. Now it's called a paper prototype because back in the day, about 5-10 years ago, when this type of thing was becoming more prevalent, they actually would do it with literal pieces of paper. And they would kind of like draw it out and use, they would sort of use post-it notes to show input coming in and all that kind of stuff. That's less common these days. Most of the time people will use prototyping software like Figma or Adobe XD or Sketch or something like that. So once again, this is kind of how it might look, where it's like, this is the first page of the app, slide, and then it goes to here, and then you click on this, and it goes, you know what I mean? Or this is like Wagit, and it's like you slide, and then you come to the opening page, you put in names, and then it takes you to here, and you can, I click on this, and it goes to this. So the point of this, once again, is not to like worry about design or anything like that. It's really to show how things interact with each other, hence interaction design, how we go from page to page or slide to slide, or however you want to think of it. So think about like, if you are using an app or even something like an application like an ATM machine, how do you get from screen 1 to screen 2, from screen 2 to screen 3? You know what I mean? How do you interact with it? Do you click? Do you use a push button? Do you use something else? Do you use like a joystick, like on an arcade game or something like that? So there's a lot of ways to, think, and that's kind of what the paper prototype is for. You can even use it for coming up with just sort of demoing ideas. This is a fun one I found. This is
When you shop in the Andronicos app,
this particular developer made a paper prototype of like how their app game is going to work. So it's like, this is kind of how it starts. They have a little cute music here. All right, so the idea is you click and it goes to the next page, so they're kind of showing like the selection screen. And then I think they eventually will hit the play button. So you hit that button and then it's like, it goes to a loading screen. There's like a little cat paw that goes across it. And then you're home alone. And then this is like a top-down view of the game, and like you're a cat and you're chasing like a mouse or something. So it's like, why did they do this? Well, I mean, programming something takes a long time. This is all done with paper. I mean, depending how much detail you put it in, you could have maybe done this in an hour or something. That's a lot less work than trying to code a whole game, you know what I mean? And so you could show this to people, stakeholders, people who matter, and people can say, I like it, I don't like it, maybe instead of a top down, we do something else. It's a third person, camera behind or whatever, right? The point here is like you're prototyping what you're doing without spending too much time. Okay. That's also why it originally was done with paper, because it doesn't matter if you're not, it's not so precious. You can like throw it away and stuff like that. Next is a mock-up. Okay. The way I always kind of describe a mock-up is we talked about a wireframe, right? The wireframe's job is to kind of set up layout without worrying about design elements like color and type. The style tile kind of worries about style and type and doesn't worry really about the layout. So I always kind of say wireframe plus style tile equals mockup. Okay. And what a mockup is, it's a visual representation of what the project will look like, but it's not actually coded. So in other words, like, someone might make a this is what the website is supposed to look like, but this isn't a website. You don't have to, write a bunch of HTML and CSS code or anything like that. You're just kind of visually showing what it will look like. You know what I mean? Or if I was going to set up a app, I'd be like, this is what the app would look like page to page. But once again, I'm not programming in C# or anything like that. I'm just kind of like laying out kind of the idea of what it would look like. Okay. There's even actually interactive mockups. This is kind of a little step beyond. So the same kind of programs that can kind of do this paper prototyping that I was talking about, like Figma, you could set up like an interactive mockup. The idea of the interactive mockup is if you wanted to show a client maybe how some of the elements work, but without actually programming them. So for instance, you could set up a mockup, interactive mockup where like you put your cursor over a button and it changes color, or it, you click on something and it actually switches out the photo or something like that, something that would require JavaScript in an actual web page. So the point of this is like to show interactive elements in case to someone who, so that people understand how that works, to clients who want to review this, to other team members, so that everyone can kind of understand how the project is going to work. Once again, there's no coding involved. You're not using, HTML and CSS and JavaScript. You're just kind of you're using a program like Figma, like Adobe XD, Sketch. There's some other ones out there to kind of show how the interactions will look when the project is actually done. The final is what we sometimes refer to as a low fidelity prototype. We're not going to do this in this class, and to be honest, maybe in like the 4 or 527, maybe we'll do this. But a low fidelity prototype is the idea that like you make a working version of it, but it's super simplified. Okay, so like if I was doing a game, it's like instead of worrying about doing fancy graphics and having, all the cool music and everything, let's just, I might just be like, okay, here's this character. Can the character be in the world? Great, we got that to work. Okay, can I make the character move left, right, forward, backwards without it falling through? Okay, that works. Can the character collect like a basic object, like a sphere or something? Did it do that? Great. Okay. So like the point of this is really just to show like the super basic functionality of what you want the project to do, but you're not worrying about like, once again, like the visual design or audio, or even maybe even sometimes interaction. You just want to prove you can make things work. Okay. So this is, you can kind of understand that from a video game perspective. If I was doing this in like, for a more complex website, let's pretend you're doing like a Netflix type situation. Netflix is a very complex situation where it's like you have a web page that's pulling files from a storage database. Okay, when you click on a movie, that's essentially what you're doing. So rather than getting all of the movies on Netflix to work, I would be like, all right, what if I just make a basic web page? I click on a thing that says like, whatever, whatever the cool new movie is, whatever Marvel movie, and it pulls this one file just to prove it can work from a server. That would be like a low fidelity prototype. It's not meant to be the final product by any stretch. I'm not going to worry about colors or, loading time or whatever. I'm just like basically trying to show like, look, it works. I can get it to work. Now, once you get it to work, then it's like, all right, how do we actually make it look visually interesting and be good? All the design elements that would actually go into that. So here's kind of, these are sometimes referred to as alphas. There's something in gaming called beta testers, which are people who test games that are not 100% finished. Before you get to a beta, there's an alpha, and these are just like, they haven't really finished a lot of how the way the games works. This is like, these are from old, I think PS1s. So it's like, oops. So it's like, the idea here is, here's RoboCop. We can make RoboCop walk. There's not really a lot else going on. He's walking entirely off of the set or the world, so obviously that's not good, But the point is not like, is this the finished game? The point is like, hey, we made a character, we made him walk, make him walk around, That is a low fidelity prototype. Here's this guy, he's running. I never played any of these games, but like these are a little bit more. Some of these are a little bit more done, but all righty. So hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of the stages of prototyping. What I'm going to talk about in the next video is wireframing. Okay. Wireframing is the key, is the aspect, as I talked about earlier, about laying out elements and figuring out the layouts of things. Okay.